It is a haunting image, an old black and white photograph from the early 1900s, showing an imposing concrete tower rising from the middle of a desolate stretch of land. The image is grainy, and the caption simply reads, "Transmission Tower, 1924. Yet something is wrong. No major construction project could have been completed in such remote, barren areas without massive effort. The strange part? No official records for these massive structures, no contractors listed, no blueprints found. It seems as if these towers, and their vast, deep foundations, were simply dropped into existence. As the years go by, similar towers appear across the United States, often in remote areas, sometimes near abandoned towns. Their existence is almost forgotten, but the foundations, they're still there, standing silent, like relics of a forgotten era. Why are these towers still standing, and who built them? By the 1920s, radio had transformed communication across America. The official story credits corporations like RCA and Westinghouse with building the infrastructure that brought voices into homes from coast to coast. Frequency towers sprouted across the landscape, each supposedly constructed to broadcast signals into an eager market. The narrative speaks of progress, innovation, and the democratization of information. Yet when one examines the photographic record, questions emerge. A postcard dated March 1924 shows a new frequency tower standing in Millbrook, Kansas, a town of barely 300 souls. No builder's name appears on the card, no company takes credit. The tower simply exists, its concrete base sunk deep into the prairie soil. Official telecommunications histories mention the major urban installations, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. But these rural towers, they appear in photographs without corresponding entries in corporate ledgers. The records speak of gradual expansion. The photographs suggest sudden manifestation. The radio boom of the 1920s is presented as organic growth, driven by consumer demand and corporate competition. Between 1920 and 1925, thousands of towers were erected nationwide. The mainstream narrative emphasizes the technological triumph, the entrepreneurial spirit, the march of modernity. But the distribution pattern tells a different story. Statistical analysis reveals an anomaly. Tower density spikes in rural counties where no significant population or business activity justified such expensive infrastructure. Harney County, Oregon, population 4,200 in 1920, received 3 major transmission towers by 1924. No radio station operated there. No corporation filed construction permits. The towers simply appeared in the landscape, documented in photographs sent as novelty postcards to distant relatives. "Our new tower," one caption reads, with no indication of who "our" referred to. Could these towers have served a different purpose than broadcasting signals? The foundations suggest something more complex than simple radio transmission. Photographs from various construction sites reveal an architectural puzzle. The foundations beneath these frequency towers extend far deeper than structural necessity would dictate. A 1923 image from rural Montana shows excavation work for a tower base. The concrete footing descends at least 30 feet into the earth, visible in the photograph's background where the pit remains partially exposed. Standard radio towers of the era required foundations of perhaps 8 to 10 feet for stability. These structures were being anchored as if to support something far more substantial. An engineering survey from 1926, preserved in county records from Nebraska, notes foundation depth excessive for stated purpose without further explanation. The excavations were massive, requiring equipment and labor forces that left no trace in local employment records. What were these massive foundations meant to support? The towers themselves weighed perhaps 20 tons. The foundations could have anchored buildings 10 times that mass. Census records from the period reveal demographic peculiarities that align suspiciously with tower construction. In 1915, the population of Sublette County, Wyoming stood at 1,047. By 1920, it had surged to 3,104, a 68% increase in 5 years. Immigration records show no corresponding influx. Birth records cannot account for the growth. Yet between 1921 and 1923, 4 major frequency towers were constructed in the county. The pattern repeats across the rural West. Towns experiencing inexplicable population surges between 1915 and 1920 consistently show tower construction in the immediate aftermath. The official explanation cites economic opportunities drawing workers. But to where? These were remote areas with minimal industry, harsh climates, and limited agricultural potential. The census enumerators themselves noted the anomaly. One 1920 census form from Nevada includes a marginal note. Many residents list no prior address. Could the tower construction and population shifts be linked in ways we don't fully understand? The question of ownership reveals another layer of mystery. Corporate records from the 1920s are meticulously preserved. Annual reports, shareholder meetings, construction contracts. Yet many of these rural frequency towers appear nowhere in the archives of the major telecommunications companies. A 1925 inquiry by the Federal Radio Commission identified 47 towers in remote locations with no clear ownership. Letters were sent. No responses came. The towers continued operating, or perhaps simply standing, their purpose unclear. Some bore small metal plaques with serial numbers, but no company names. Others had no identifying marks at all. Property records show the land beneath many towers purchased by shell corporations that dissolved within months of the sale. Transfer complete, origin of funds undetermined, reads a 1924 county clerk's notation from Arizona. Could these towers have been built by a hidden network with far more than radio on their mind? The financial trail leads nowhere. The American towers were not unique. Between 1920 and 1928, similar structures appeared across Europe, constructed with remarkable synchronicity. Photographs from rural France show towers architecturally identical to those in Wyoming. Same concrete composition, same foundation depth, same placement in isolated areas far from population centers. The German countryside sprouted its own network, often on hilltops that offered no particular advantage for radio transmission. British colonial administrators in India reported similar installations appearing in remote provinces, their construction supervised by European engineers who arrived, completed the work, and departed without establishing any ongoing operations. The architectural consistency across continents is striking. These were not local adaptations of a general technology. They followed a specific template. Was there a larger purpose to these towers beyond radio transmission? The global coordination suggests a unified plan, executed simultaneously across vast distances with precision that defies the supposed independent development of radio infrastructure. As evidence accumulates, a hypothesis emerges that challenges the comfortable narrative of technological progress. What if the frequency towers were never primarily about radio broadcasting? Their excessive foundations, their placement in demographically anomalous areas, their synchronized global appearance, these factors point toward a different function. Alternative researchers have proposed the towers served as nodes in a planetary communication system, but one operating on principles beyond simple electromagnetic transmission. Architectural blueprints discovered in a Lithuanian archive in 2003 show tower designs labeled resonance structure rather than transmission antenna. The plans include basement levels extending 40 feet below ground, filled with what appear to be acoustic chambers and metal resonators. Could these towers be the remains of a forgotten agenda? And are we still under their influence? The question becomes not what they broadcast, but what they received, or perhaps what they harmonized. The historical record shows an abrupt shift in communication patterns after 1920 that the technology of the era cannot fully explain. Radio broadcasting began commercially in 1920. By 1923, it had achieved near universal penetration in American life despite limited receiver ownership. The official narrative credits brilliant marketing and consumer enthusiasm. But the numbers don't reconcile. In 1922, approximately 60,000 radio receivers existed in the United States. Yet newspaper accounts describe radio's influence as if millions were listening. A 1923 article notes, "The message reaches all, whether they possess receiving apparatus or not." A strange phrasing. Documents from the period suggest awareness of the tower's effects beyond their stated purpose. A 1924 medical journal article discusses the new nervousness afflicting rural populations, noting highest incidence in areas near major transmission infrastructure. What did the towers do to us? And what were we meant to forget? The silence in official histories is itself revealing. Today, the foundations remain. Most of the towers themselves were dismantled between 1945 and 1960, officially declared obsolete as radio technology advanced, but the concrete bases were left in place, too expensive to remove officially, though one wonders about the true reason. These foundations can still be found, if you know where to look. They dot the American landscape, in Montana wheat fields, in Oregon rangeland, in the deserts of Nevada and Arizona. The concrete has weathered but not crumbled. Some foundations show evidence of underground chambers that were filled in before the towers were removed. Local histories rarely mention them. County records often lack documentation of their construction or removal. They are the forgotten remnants of something we're told was simply technological infrastructure. Perhaps they were, but their continuing presence raises questions the official history never answers. What was the true purpose behind the frequency towers? The foundations remain, but their history has been obscured. The demographic anomalies associated with tower construction suggest a coordinated repopulation effort that the census records only partially document. The sudden appearance of thousands of people in rural areas, their lack of documented origins, their arrival coinciding precisely with tower construction. This pattern repeats across every region where the towers were built. Alternative researchers have proposed these populations were deliberately relocated, though from where and why remains unclear. The official explanation cites economic migration, but the economic opportunities in these remote areas were minimal. What drew people to Harney County, Oregon, or Sublette County, Wyoming? The census takers noted the strangeness, but had no framework for understanding it. Many appear recently arrived, but claim long residence, one enumerator wrote in 1920. The towers were built, the populations appeared, and within a generation, both were treated as if they had always been there. Historical amnesia or historical engineering. The global synchronization extends beyond architecture to timing. The construction surge occurred worldwide between 1920 and 1928, a remarkably narrow window for what's presented as independent technological development across different continents. The towers in America, Europe, Asia, and Australia all appeared within this 8-year period, following the same design principles, serving ostensibly similar purposes. This suggests either unprecedented international cooperation in an era of weak global coordination, or a single organizing force directing construction across sovereign nations. Historical records show no international radio convention during this period that could have established such unified standards. The League of Nations had no telecommunications committee, yet the towers rose in synchronicity. Their foundations sunk to identical depths, their placement following patterns that transcend national borders and cultural contexts. Together, these point toward a civilizational project whose scale and purpose have been systematically obscured. To accept the alternative interpretation means confronting uncomfortable implications about the nature of our historical knowledge. If the frequency towers were part of a larger hidden agenda, whether for population control, communication beyond conventional understanding, or purposes we haven't yet imagined, then what else has been obscured? The official history presents the 20th century as a march of progress, each innovation building logically on what came before. But the towers suggest a different story. inherited infrastructure, whose true purpose was forgotten or deliberately erased. Massive projects executed without accountability, populations relocated without explanation. The personal cost of accepting this alternative history is cognitive dissonance on a civilizational scale. It means acknowledging we may be inhabitants of a world we don't fully understand, living among the remnants of systems whose original functions remain hidden. Are we continuing to operate within those systems, unknowing? The photograph still exists in the Montana Historical Society archives. Transmission Tower, 1924. The image is grainy, the tower stark against empty prairie. But now, knowing what the census data reveals, what the architectural surveys discovered, what the global pattern suggests, the photograph transforms. What seemed like simple infrastructure documentation becomes evidence of something far more complex. The foundation in the photograph descends beyond the frame's edge, its true depth invisible. The empty landscape around it raises new questions. Empty because the photograph predates settlement, or empty because something about the tower's function kept people away. The caption offers no answers, just that single line of supposed certainty. The foundations remain across America, silent and slowly weathering. The towers are gone, but their bases endure, waiting for questions that official history never thought to ask. What else remains hidden beneath the surface?